Okay, welcome everyone to our journal club. I'm Panos Bostanis. I'm a lecturer here at the Research Center at the University of Kent, where we have two ABAI verified courses in applied behavior analysis and positive behavior support. Those are our master courses. So we are behavior analysts here at Tizard, and our work is about disseminating good practice in behavior analysis, and that's the purpose of the journal club. So to that end, today we are hosting Dr. Sigmund Eldevik, who is a very, very knowledgeable researcher and who's going to be discussing his area of expertise, which is early intensive behavioral intervention. We are going to be offering a free CEU to all of you. Those of you who are BCBAs, we're going to give you a CEU. Those of you who are UKBA certs, which is the official certification, the new official certification here in the UK, we are more than happy to give you a CPD. So just let me know when you email me the three keywords, which I'm going to deliver throughout today's presentation, with your full name as you want it on the certificate and your certification number. I'm going to add my email to the chat, but I am aware that some of you might not be able to access the chat, sometimes depending on what browser you're using or what device. I know that the chat might be temperamental, so just note that my email is A as alpha, A.Vostanis, which is my last name, at kent.ac.uk. So keep a note of the three keywords that I'm going to deliver throughout the session, and at the end of it, please email me the three keywords, your name as you want it on the certificate, and your BCBA certification number or your UKBA certification details. Okay, Sigmund, thank you very, very much for joining us today. We're really excited to host you. The people who have seen the flyer would have most probably read your bio. So I would like to start by asking you to tell us what you're currently working on. I know you're a very active researcher, and then please take it away and teach us about good practice in AIBI.
All right, good. Thank you, Thomas. Yes, we have a research group at Oslo Met University. One thing that comes that we are doing at the moment is we are doing an updated individual participant data meta-analysis of EIBI. So it will be an update from the one that we published back in 2010. And we have now about 800, maybe 900 participants from about 20 studies. And so far the preliminary analysis look really good in the sense that it really goes in the favor of EIBI.
Good.
So that's
good news.
Exciting. Yeah, that's as you know, there has been several other meta-analysis published over the last 5-10 years, but I think we can hopefully we can do it a little more targeted and pointed towards a good review of individual participant data. But we'll see. We are working on it now, so hopefully within this year we can finish it and get it out there. Yes, and today the project is we have done research on to see if quality and quantity, that means weekly intervention hours, if that is related to outcome in EIBI. And we have employed a broader range of outcome measure than what is often used and published in the literature up until now. So let's see. First question may be you ask, can we measure the quality of EIBI? Maybe what we have done is we have built a system based on the what is called a periodic service review, and this is a total quality management system from OBM that has been developed at the Institute of Applied Behavior Analysis in California by Gary Lavinia and Tom Willis and others. So they have used this system or developed it at their institute, and where they deal with a lot of people with very severe challenging behaviors. But anyway, it's based on the following principles. First of all, it's user driven. That means that the local team should develop their own standards for what they consider to be an optimal program. So when we are in the field of EIBI, there are certain limitations on how far you can take this, because there are certain elements that have to be in place before you can call something EIBI. I'll get back to that in a second. It is transparent. That's the second principle. So everyone involved will have their own standards to live up to. The leadership and the people actually delivering the intervention, all levels will have their own standards to live up to, and everyone else or everyone knows what those standards are. Third principle is that we have measurable items. So every single item that we put in this standard is operationally defined, and that means you can say if it's done or not done, and it is periodically measured. And as we know also from other research in behavior analysis, just the fact that you monitor something or measure something, that in itself will sometimes lead to improved quality. But anyway, the scoring is, so we make a standard. The one that we are currently using has 18 items. We have done this for about 15 years, and we have revised and revised again. So it's an ever evolving process. Now we are down to 18 or 19 items, and each of them is scored every 3 months. We used to do this every month, but now we're down to every 3 months. So we score a 0 for not done and a 1 for done on every single item. And then we take the total items done divided by the total possible items, multiply by 100, and that gives you a percentage score, which is an expression of the quality. And these percentages can be graphed and put on the wall, and it sort of provides some visual feedback for everyone involved. And for many of us, that also is can be a powerful motivation. And lastly, when we do this type of thing, we can also hone in and pinpoint on areas or items that we are doing well, and items where we need to improve. And we can do this on our individual cases, and we can do it as on our organization as a whole. This is a typical graph that you will get when you start implementing a PSR system. So since this is meant to reflect what the standards you make, they are meant to reflect an optimal program. So they should be strict, and it's often so strict that you are never going to reach 100%. Typically, when we start off, and this has been replicated across many types of sites and many types of interventions, you start out about 50%, and as the months go by, you steadily increase, and then you end up around 80% plus minus. And it's up to you to decide, but in many cases, this would be an acceptable quality level. Okay, so let's see. Let me just run through quickly what are considered necessary elements before you can call something EIBI, or what, or should I say what are common elements regardless of where EIBI is provided, whether it's a home program, whether it's in a center or a preschool or whatever. There are some common elements. So first of all, intervention should be individualized and tailored, and you should address all important skill areas and domains. Second, many ABA procedures are used both to build new repertoires and to reduce interfering behaviors. So essentially, the entire Cooper book is relevant at some point. It should, and third is that it should be experts on in ABA and with experience with young children with autism that directs the intervention. And this means also that when you have to try to stay abreast with the ever growing and evolving literature that is published every year on different type of procedures and so on that can be incorporated into an EIBI program. And it's also the case that it's developing. So EIBI program today looks usually quite different from a EIBI program, what it looked like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Next, it should be based on how typical children develop, developmental sequences in typical children, and there are also now published lots of manuals that can help you and guide the intervention. Next, parents should be involved and serve as active co-therapists, as they say. And programming should be intensive, minimum 20 hours. This is a matter of some debates. Some places you will see 30 hours, some 35 or 40 hours, but anyway, it also depends a lot on how you count the hours. But let's move on. Yeah, and duration is usually 2 or more years, and lastly, it starts it usually starts in the preschool years. So the question is, can we make a quality system that captures all of these elements? So for this, we had the children referred to centers in Oslo, one in Oslo and one in Bergen, the 2 biggest cities in Norway, that were diagnosed with autism. They were between 18 months and 6 years old at intake. We had a measure of intelligence on most of them and a measure of adaptive behavior using the Vineland adaptive behavior scales. So that was the minimum. We also had a measure of autism severity for many of these kids, and a measure of problem behavior, the aberrant behavior checklist, and lastly a measure of preferences. So it's to see whether or not they preferred social stimuli or non-social stimuli. And we had a third group, a group that received treatment as usual and an eclectic type of provision. Okay, so the quality standards, as I said, they were developed by us and has been revised again many times. So we are now doing this every 3 months. And one of the other changes we have recently made is that the preschools where we work in Norway, virtually all early intervention is done in the child's local preschool. So in order to I don't know, create in an attempt to create more ownership of the program, we have the preschool being responsible for scoring out the quality standards, and there is some leeway, some room for making local adjustments. It's rarely done, but anyway, there could be some local adjustments if needed, and if you at the supervisor's discretion. I'll just show you some examples of what it could look like. These are
before you crack on with your examples, just to deliver the first keyword for the CU. Okay, I am aware that some of you just joined, so keep in mind I'm gonna deliver 3 keywords for the CU. So the first one is Oslo. The first keyword is Oslo. Okay, the city, Oslo. I have my email in the chat. I will post it again for those of you who just joined. Thanks, Sigmund.
Okay, good. Thank you, Amos. Okay, this is just to show you what it looks like. It's all done in Excel. So these are actually standards that we do at intake and when they stop preschool and move on to school proper. But the actual standards, they look like this. So it's the intervention. It has to be 20 hours a week of planned intervention time. You have to complete at least 90% of the sessions that are programmed. You have to have some kind of plan for following and providing support throughout the entire day. You have to have a team of at least 2 people involved in the intervention. You have weekly team meetings in the preschool, and you have also practical tasks that needs to be done every week. If you are making material, laminating, videoing things, getting a new chair or whatever it is, stuff like that. And when this second part has to do with the actual teaching and data collection. So you have to update the program overview sheet after each meeting, and you have to update every single program and the description of it. You have to have targets in groups, and targets that are throughout the unit. Remember, all of this is done in mainstream preschools in Norway, so you have targets that you work on outside also, and in the unit itself. And you have to have a plan for how to involve the parents so they can follow up this at home every day. Data collection is done as agreed. This is typically if you are doing something in addition to the usual data collection, if you collect data on problematic behavior, sleep, or eating and stuff like that. We do evaluations. MUF is one of them, that's a local one, and the ABLES. And this part about evaluations is that we use this quality standard as part of the evaluation meeting. And we use the MUF and we use the ABLES, and there are some reports that we have to turn in to the city every year. And the last point is that every member of the team should be checked on their practical teaching skills. Okay, so we divided the participants when we did this analysis into 3 groups: a higher quality team, our group, a lower quality group, and the treatment as usual group. So we ended up with 33 kids in the lower quality and 22 kids in the higher quality group, and this is the treatment as usual group. So they are pretty similar on all intake variables. This is the hours. So one of the main things that makes this a lower quality group is this thing, the hours spent on weekly goals. So it's lower intensity, 13.5 hours here on average, and this group, the higher quality group, has 23 hours. The usual treatment group it's hard to pin down, so we don't really know that, but so we just put 5+ hours here, and it's after 2 years of intervention. So you may wonder how we count intensity and weekly hours. So everything that is put into writing and evaluated at the week as a program and evaluated at the weekly meetings, and the time we spend on those we count as intervention time. So it's not only one-to-one in a separate treatment room as many believe in Norway. But here you typically work on new and difficult tasks. But we also count if you have targets in smaller groups, in the unit, preschool unit, and at home. So all of these can add up to the count of weekly intervention hours. Yeah, these are just some characteristics. They are pretty similar in terms of what type of diagnosis they have. Autism, atypical autism, and the gender distribution is also similar. At least it's not statistically significant differences. So I mentioned the outcome measures. We have the Vineland to measure adaptive behavior, the CARS to measure autism severity, and for a lot of the kids we also have a measure of intelligence. We have a measure of problem behavior, the aberrant behavior checklists, and lastly something called SMARC, which measure preferences. Okay, so what we have done, some of you might have seen this, but this is recently published by the BHCOE. They accredit agencies that provide EIBI. And I was part of putting this together, and we have made some recommendation for what type of assessment instruments you can use to evaluate your services. So it's largely built on this document. So I don't know if you're familiar with the CARS 2. It's 15 questions, and each question is scored from 1 to 4. 4 is the most serious one, and you simply add them up and you get the total raw score, and this is an expression of autism severity. And you can also get a categorization. So it's minimal to no, mild to moderate, or severe autism. It's actually quite in widely use now, and it has decent psychometric properties, both reliability and validity. Yeah, so these are just the groups, the classifications that I mentioned, and their corresponding raw scores. And we have the aberrant behavior checklist. It's kind of old in the way they phrase stuff. I believe now it's out in a revised version. But this is also in being very widely used and has also decent psychometric properties. It's 58 questions that are scored from 0 to 3. So 3 is the most serious, and 0 is no problem at all. And they are divided on irritability, lethargy, stereotypy, hyperactivity, and inappropriate speech. And you can see that there's a different number of questions on each of these areas, so you can add up and get total scores on each of them. So just some examples of what you ask about. This is the irritability one in self-injury, aggressiveness, screaming, and so on. This is lethargy, listless, sluggish, inactive, seeks isolation, and so on. Stereotypic behavior, meaningless recurring body movements, stereotyped repetitive movements, and so on. Here we have the hyperactivity one, non-compliance, excessively active, boisterous, impulsive, and so on. And lastly, we have inappropriate speech, talks excessively, repetitive speech, and so on. Okay. I will also show you briefly the SMARC. So this is was developed by one of our PhD students 10-15 years ago, Lars Klintwall. And it gives you a measure of the child's preferences. So one of them is typical preferences that you will find in typical kids, toys, interaction, play, and so on. And the other one is atypical, stereotypical, repetitive stuff, non-social. So you simply go through a list like this and cross off yes or no, and then you count the number of yeses on each of them. So the more yeses you have on this, the more social stimuli you prefer, and the more here, the more yeses, the more stereotypical, atypical, non-social preferences you have. Okay, so we have between group comparison design, except for the SMARC, where we only have data from one of the groups. So these are the groups again, higher quality, lower quality, and the treatment as usual group. Just a few words about the treatment as usual group before we move on. They had really the similar statemented hours, the similar resources as the EIBI groups, but instead of it being a behavior analyst coming in and consult, it was a special education teacher that provided this consultation. And this was typically between 2 and 5 hours per week. And I said this also, but there is no real accurate data on the time spent on weekly goals. So we have just estimated that at 5 hours plus per week. And it's typically an eclectic mix of alternative communication, often some ABA for toileting or PECs or something like that. Total communication, sensory motor therapies teach. It's quite popular in Norway. Riding, swimming, groups and stuff like that, and other things that are done or implemented at the teacher's experience or discretion. Okay, results. Let's look at Vineland first. We have outcome data on all 3 groups for this. This is my favorite way of displaying data. So we have here, this is the high quality group with a score of 85%. This is a lower quality group, score of almost 70, and this is the treatment as usual group. We don't have any quality score for that group. Here is every participant in this group has a blue bar, and this bar represents the change in standard score in the ABC composite score on the Vineland following 2 years of intervention. So it's sorted from the highest negative change to the highest positive change, and this is the mean change at 11.6, and this is the lower quality one, where they have only a very small change, and similar in the treatment as usual group. So I don't know, some of you might be familiar with the reliable change index, and this it's a formula that computes excuse me, and tells me the change you need to have to be 95% sure that it is the intervention that is responsible for the change. We computed the reliable change index back in 2010 when we did the first individual participant data analysis of EIBI. So it turns out you need to have a change of 21 standard points on the Vineland. Quite stiff. We found that when we applied this to all the kids that have received EIBI and where outcome has been reported in the literature, about 20% of them met this benchmark. So looking at our data, we have this dotted line here represents the reliable change index, and we had 19% of the kids, which is very close to the benchmark, meet the reliable change index. None of the kids in the lower quality group met this benchmark, and none of the kids in the treatment as usual group met this benchmark. If you look at IQ scores, we only have data, unfortunately, from the lower quality group and the treatment as usual group on this. And it looks like this. We have, again, same type of graph. Mean change, respectable 10 plus in IQ for the lower quality EIBI, whereas the treatment as usual group, they lose 1 point. The reliable change index for IQ is very stiff, also 27 points. And we found when we applied this index to all the published literature up until 2010, that about 20 or 30% of the kids met this very stiff criterion. Let's see if I have that somewhere here. Yeah, this is again same data, and this is the reliable change index at 27 IQ points. 11% met this in the lower quality EIBI group. So that's considerably less than the 30% that's the benchmark. Okay, moving on, we have this is autism severity scores, and here it's better to lose points. So and this similar type of graph, and it shows the decrease in the CARS raw score for every single participant. This is the lower quality group. On average, they lose about 5 points on the CARS, and the higher quality group, they lose twice, about 11 points. We don't have any reliable change yet index for this, but that's one of the things that we will be looking at when we do our new updated meta-analysis. Okay, let's see. So the mean change, this is the pre and the post. So the higher quality group, they had slightly higher scores than the lower quality group. So 41, it is within the severe range, but they still lost 11 raw score points, and the lower quality group lost half that. Okay, moving on, we have, let's see, we have, I thought I made a new one on this. Okay, but this is the, hold on a little bit. Okay, yeah, this is the reductions in problem behavior. So I've just plotted also the max possible scores in each area. So you may remember that there were different number of questions on all of these areas. So this is just to keep things in perspective. But anyway, higher quality group, they lost more points all over in all areas than the lower quality group. So same pattern repeats itself. Moving on to the change in preferences. This is measured. This is data only from the lower quality group, by the way. We have more data, but we haven't really analyzed it properly yet and summed it all up. But still we can see a pattern that these are the non-social stimuli, the number of non-social stimuli preferred, pre and post. Sorry, this is the social stimuli. So it's an increase in the social stimuli, and there is a decrease in the number of non-social stimuli that they preferred.
Sigmund, could I just jump in for the second keyword?
Sure, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so guys, the second keyword for your CEU is social. The second keyword for your CEU is social. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, I mentioned that we had about 10 IQ point change. And if we plot, this is studies that have been published over the years where they report IQ change. So change in IQ is on the y-axis and weekly hours is on the x-axis up here. So Lovas, for instance, reported 40 hours a week and an IQ change of 22. IQset from Norway had 27 hours and had an IQ change of about 17, and all of these blue dots are average IQ changes from other published papers. The point here being that they seem to fall very nicely on a line, a linear, so it seems to be a linear relationship between the weekly intervention hours and IQ change, at least when you look at the average changes in groups. But and also when we provided the 13 hours in the lower quality group, we got just about what we would expect based on this line, with an IQ change of about 10. So it all falls nicely in place, you could say. Okay, so we look at these are some recent data from the lower quality group, what made them a lower quality group than the higher quality group. So the things that they struggled with are marked in red. So that means they scored, or these are the average number of completed items. So this means that 32% in the lower quality group did this first point, and if over 90% did it, it's green. Between 80 and 90, it's yellow, and between 70 and 80, it's orange, and everything below that is marked in red. So what is in red here are things that were typically reported as not being done for most of these kids or preschools in this group. So it has to do a lot with intensity, whether or not they planned for 20 hours a week of intervention. And this is if they completed 90% of the sessions they planned. Over here we have if they had some sort of provision and systematic things going on for the entire day. Here, if the intervention team was constituted of at least 2 people. And down here we have that everyone on the team were checked out on practical scales. So it's something similar to the things you do when you do a check of an RBT renewal. You have to demonstrate a number of skills. So only 4% did that. Okay, so if we move to these back to these common elements for EIBI, we can see that this point H, programming is intensive, is something we saw that they struggled with. We saw that since they got limited training and struggled to update programs and program overview sheets, we can say that this also was an issue. The intervention was not updated and individualized. And we have and this is similar with these points also, that if you are not receiving training, proper training and checking out the skills, we are not sure if they were able to implement different ABA procedures and so on, and whether or not the people doing the implementation had, or we know that they didn't have experience with ABA and young children with autism. So that's also a problem area. So all in all, those 4 elements here are things that the lower quality group struggled with. The rest of these points were quite similar between the higher and the lower quality groups. Okay, so these data are this is the 2-year follow-up from an article that we published in 2020, and but here we report outcome after 1 year, and what I just showed you now was outcome after 2 years. So question is, maybe can we still call the service that was provided in the lower quality group, can we still call it EIBI, or what should we call it? That's something to think about. Let's see where we are. We've also thought and discussed a lot how can we improve scores. Is there anything we can do to have more consistent quality? One thing we have been talking about since in Norway, the kids with autism, they will go to their local preschool. So another option would be to have reinforced preschools where we can have more experienced and qualified staff, where you can accumulate more expertise over time. So you can have maybe 4, 5, 6 kids with autism enrolled in the same preschool. And somehow we could have improved buy-in from the preschool staff and the management, because it varies a lot how the level of dedication and the level of enthusiasm we meet when we go into the preschools. One of the things that we've done with this is, as I mentioned, is to have them fill in the quality standards. And lastly, we have been looking at center-based models. We know that some of the centers that provide EIBI in the US have exceptionally good outcome. And there are some real advantages of operating out from a center. You can have all sorts of material can be available and made and shared and so on, and it's probably a lot easier to also build a professional environment and community and things like that. And we also have collaborated with a center in Poland, which also recently published outcome data, which looked really good also. Okay, let me say, I think that's all I had for today. If
thank you.
Any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
We had a question about Mark, where we can access it, but I see colleague has put a link in the chat. But Sigmund, where would you recommend we access SMARC? Is there a place where we can?
I can send it to you, Thanos, and if you have a list, you can send it on, or
sure. Yes, we typically do that. We do send the slides and sometimes like additional materials with the CEU certificate. So more than happy to do this for our attendees. Guys, do you have any questions? Please post them in the chat or the Q&A button that we've got here that you can press, and I will happily read them out to Sigmund for you. As the colleagues are thinking of their questions, Sigmund, could I ask you one? One of the things I always struggle with the hours argument is that I always think, well, okay, we could provide, for example, more hours of EIBI, but ultimately, does it not come down to the quality of those hours? You know, you could do 20 hours of really good ABA, and you could do 30 hours of really poor ABA.
Of course.
Now I know you touched upon this when you were discussing the periodic service review and so on, but could you perhaps say a bit more about that? It would be interesting to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's a good question, and we know that quality varies a lot. But for the purposes of this type of analysis, we are just making the assumptions that it is equally distributed across the groups,
Okay.
which may or may not be the case. But
I was thinking more broadly. You know, I was not necessarily focusing on your paper and your research. I was generally thinking, in your experience, do you think that this has been addressed in the literature adequately? Because, you know, a lot of critics of ABA interventions will say, you guys are recommending, you know, these many hours for children, but how do we know that what you do is actually good quality? So do you think this, in your opinion, has been addressed in the literature, or do you think there is more that we should do in that space?
I think there's a lot more we should do with this. The center that we worked with in Poland, it's based on the PCDI model, and they have a really good system for evaluating all levels of staff, the people that work on the implementation side on the floor daily with the kids, and everything up to the leadership is evaluated with in a system, and it's done, I believe, every year or maybe even more often than that. And in that way, you are checked out regularly whether or not you are delivering the procedures and everything, the programs by the book, and you are scored mercilessly on several variables: professionalism, program implementation, whether or not you provide learning opportunities, and many other things like that. And I don't think, to my knowledge, we don't have anything similar within the EIBI field. We have, I don't know if you're familiar with PRT, but they also have an impressive system for teaching people, and they have, I think it's 5 levels, and you have to video yourself, send it in for scoring, and then get feedback on it and so on, and you have to qualify through the levels. To my knowledge, we don't have anything that systematic and within EIBI, and it's needed. I know there are many local variations of this, but nothing that has really permeated the entire field. Unfortunately, we have some attempts with the RBT certification and the BCBA, but it turns out that having an RBT certification or a BCBA certification is not, it's good, but it's not really tailored towards EIBI. So something in addition to that is probably needed.
Okay, thank you, Sigmund. I've got a few questions from the attendees. Could you remind us how were people allocated into the different research arms, the treatment arms? I think you mentioned non-randomized, but
yeah, it wasn't randomized. Okay, so it turns out that one of the centers, the center in Bergen, was the center that had highest quality and not many of the same problems that we had in Oslo. So it was essentially a geographical assignment. So all the kids in Bergen are in one group and all the kids in Oslo are in one group, and the treatment as usual group were all located or recruited from a local hospital in outside Oslo.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Another question says, did you analyze what predicted PSR results?
No, we haven't looked into that yet. So, but that's an interesting question.
I think you have an idea now. I could see that smile.
Yeah, we need to look into that.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Another question says, when you mentioned teams of two, did that mean two implementers, for example, RBT type of personnel and BCBA level personnel?
Yeah, no, it means the RBT level. So what typically happens in a preschool in Norway is that kids get a statement, 20 hours a week of ABA, but there is only one person dedicated to deliver those hours. So, but what we are trying to achieve is that rather it being that only that person, we try to locate or distribute these hours across more people in the preschool staff. And usually we can get it done, but often it's many different things that makes it problematic. But as you can imagine, it is of some importance, because 20 hours with one child alone every week can be very, very tough. And it's good for the kid also to have relationships with more adults.
Okay, thank you. Just to give the final keyword for everybody, I'm aware that it's almost 7 o'clock. The last keyword for your CEU is school. The last keyword for your CEU is school. I've got one more question, Sigmund, if you would be happy to answer that as well. Is there an equivalent of index of multiple deprivation to see if that affected results?
What does that mean? I don't understand the question.
Is there an equivalent? If I understand the question correctly, it's asking if there is an equivalent index of multiple deprivation to see if that would affect results. But I'm not sure what multiple deprivation. If you could elaborate a bit, Paul, that would be helpful. Thank you. For those of you who might want to jump out, just to say, you should have my email in the chat. It's a.vostanis@kent.ac.uk, but I will pop it again in the chat. Please email me your CEUs, the 3 keywords with your name as you want it in the certificate, and your BCBA certification number. Please note that we would expect your CEUs to be within the day, if not first thing tomorrow. I cannot issue CEUs for people who email me in 3, 4, 5 days or more. Okay, so please be on top of it. I don't see a follow-up question. Okay, there it is. This is a scale to cover things like socioeconomic status, nationally recognized for research purposes. Not sure if there is an equivalent.
I don't know either, but it's an interesting thing to look into. There might be some relationships here that we don't know about. So I don't know. It could be. Is it stuff like the education of the parents, income, siblings, stuff like that? So it should be. It should be looked into. I to my knowledge, it's not done yet.
Are you not planning to run these as moderator analysis for the meta-analysis that you're working on? Are you not planning to code these variables?
We don't have enough data or consistent data reported across all the studies to do that, unfortunately.
Okay.
Some studies, yeah.
I suppose it goes back to the problem with behavior analytic literature not always reporting demographics in adequate detail. So
some are very good at it, but it's not consistent enough to do a meta-analysis of it, I think. But
excellent. Well, Sigmund, thank you very, very much, and I can see other people thanking you in the chat. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you for
our next.
Yeah.
It was our pleasure. Thank you, Sigmund. Our next journal club is going to be in June, and we are going to have Dave Palmer talk to us about a behavior analytic account of memory and remembering. So if you're interested in more conceptual, deep considerations of how can we explain these processes that other fields attempt to tackle and understand, by all means, join me, and you will see the flyer going around soon. Thank you all, and Sigmund, I'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.